Welcome to our first Vrndavana Sangha, where we'll be hearing and chanting to our heart's content here in the holy Dham of Vrindavan. Just all of us arrived here, or some of us arrived a little earlier. I got here this afternoon. So we're going to start with a little reading and Katha tonight from the Srimad Bhagavatam. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Narayanam Namaskritya.
Narayanam Namaskritya.
Naram Chaiva Narottamam.
Naram Chaiva Narottamam.
Devim Sarasatim Vyasam.
Devim Saraswatim Vyasam.
Tato Jayam Ujiraye.
Tato Jayam Ujiraye.
So today we'll be reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 5. And we'll start off at text number 1. So this chapter is an important discussion between Srila Vyasadeva and Srila Narada Muni. And Narada appears on the scene just in time to help his disciple Vyasadeva, who's feeling a little down. And we'll find out why he feels that way as soon as I can get back to the text. Okay, here we go. 151. Sutta Uvacha Atatam Sukamasina Upasinam Brihashrava Devarshi Prahaviprarshim Vina Panis Mayandiva. So Sutta is speaking, Sutta Uvacha, and he says, Ata, therefore. Tam, him, Sukham, Asina, comfortably seated. So Sukham means like happy, and Asina means seated. So like happily seated. And Upasinam, unto one sitting nearby. So there's two of them sitting there. And Brihatshrava. Brihatshrava means the greatly respected one. Devarshi, the great Rishi among the gods. Praha said, Viprarshim, unto the Rishi among the Brahmanas. Vina Pani, one who carries the Vina in his hand. Smayan Iva, apparently smiling. Sutta Goswami said, thus the sage amongst the gods, Narada, comfortably seated and apparently smiling, addressed the Rishi amongst the Brahmanas, Vedavyas. Purport, Narada was smiling because he well knew the great sage Vedavyas and the cause of his disappointment. As he will explain gradually, Vyasadeva's disappointment was due to insufficiency in presenting the science of devotional service. Narada knew the defect, and it was confirmed by the position of Vyas. Text 2. Narada Uvacha Parasharya Mahabhaga Bhavata Kachchidatmana Paritushyati Sharira Atma Manasa Evava. Addressing Vyasadeva, the son of Parashara, Narada inquired, are you satisfied by identifying with the body or the mind as objects of self-realization? Purport, this was a hint by Narada to Vyasadeva regarding the cause of his despondency. Vyasadeva, as the descendant of Parashara, a greatly powerful sage, had the privilege of having a great parentage which should not have given Vyasadeva cause for despondency. Being a great son of a great father, he should not have identified the self with the body or the mind. Ordinary men with a poor fund of knowledge can identify the body as self or the mind as self, but Vyasadeva should not have done so. One cannot be cheerful by nature unless one is factually seated in self-realization, which is transcendental to the material body and mind. 3. Jignasitam susampandam apite mahadadbhutam kritavan bharatam yastvam sarvarta paribrimhitam. Your inquiries were full and your studies were also well fulfilled, and there is no doubt that you have prepared a great and wonderful work, the Mahabharata, which is full of all kinds of Vedic sequences elaborately explained. Purport. The despondency of Vyasadeva was certainly not due to his lack of sufficient knowledge, because as a student he had fully inquired about the Vedic literatures, as a result of which the Mahabharata is compiled with full explanation of the Vedas. 4. Jignasitam aditam cha brahmayat tat sanatanam tatapi shotshasya akritarta iva prabho. You have fully delineated the subject of impersonal Brahman, as well as the knowledge derived therefrom. Why should you be despondent in spite of all this, thinking that you are undone, my dear Prabhu? Purport. The Vedanta Sutra or Brahma Sutra compiled by Sri Vyasadeva is the full deliberation of the impersonal absolute feature, and it is accepted as the most exalted philosophical exposition in the world. It covers the subject of eternity, and the methods are scholarly. So there cannot be any doubt about the transcendental scholarship of Vyasadeva. So why should he lament? 5. Vyasuvacha asyeva me sarvamidam tvayoktam tatapi natma paritushite me tanmulam avyaktam agada bodham prachamahe twatma bhavatma bhutam. Shri Vyasadeva said, all you have said about me is perfectly correct. Despite all this, I am not pacified. I therefore question you about the root cause of my dissatisfaction, for you are a man of unlimited knowledge due to your being the offspring of one Brahma, who is self-born without mundane father and mother. Purport. In the material world, everyone is engrossed with the idea of identifying the body or the mind with the self. As such, all knowledge disseminated in the material world is related either with the body or with the mind, and that is the root cause of all despondencies. This is not always detected, even though one may be the greatest erudite scholar in materialistic knowledge. It is good, therefore, to approach a personality like Narada to solve the root cause of all despondencies. Why Narada should be approached is explained below. Text number 6. Savai bhavan veda samastakuyam upasito yat purusha purana paravaresho manasaiva vishvam srijat yavatyati gunar asangaha. My Lord, everything that is mysterious is known to you because you worship the creator and destroyer of the material world and the maintainer of the spiritual world, the original personality of Godhead, who is transcendental to the three modes of material nature. Purport. A person who is 100% engaged in the service of the Lord is the emblem of all knowledge. Such a devotee of the Lord in full perfection of devotional service is also perfect by the qualification of the personality of Godhead. As such, the eightfold perfections of mystic power, Ashtasiddhi, constitute very little of his godly opulence. A devotee like Narada can act wonderfully by his spiritual perfection, which every individual is trying to attain. Srila Narada is a 100% perfect living being, although not equal to the personality of Godhead. 7. Tramparyatan arka iva trilokim antascharo vayuriva masakshi paravare brahmani dharmato vratai snatasya me nyunam alam vichakshva. Like the sun, Your goodness can travel everywhere in the three worlds, and like the air, you can penetrate the internal region of everyone. As such, you are as good as the all-pervasive supersoul. Please, therefore, find out the deficiency in me despite my being absorbed in transcendence under disciplinary regulations and vows. Purport: transcendental realization, pious activities, worshipping the deities, charity, mercifulness, nonviolence, and studying the scriptures under strict disciplinary regulations are always helpful. 8. Sri Narada Vacha Vavatanuditam Prayam Yasho Bhagavato Malam Yenai Vaso Natusheta Manyeta Darshanam Kilam. Sri Narada said, you have not actually broadcast the sublime and spotless glories of the personality of Godhead. That personality which does not satisfy the transcendental senses of the Lord is considered worthless. Purport: the eternal relation of an individual soul with the Supreme Soul Personality of Godhead is constitutionally one of being the eternal servitor of the Eternal Master. The Lord has expanded himself as living beings in order to accept loving service from them, and this alone can satisfy both the Lord and the living beings. Such a scholar as Vyasadeva has completed many expansions of Vedic literature, ending with the Vedanta philosophy, but none of them have been written directly glorifying the personality of Godhead. Dry philosophical speculations, even on the transcendental subject of the Absolute, have very little attraction without directly dealing with the glorification of the Lord. The personality of Godhead is the last word in transcendental realization. The Absolute, realized as impersonal Brahman or localized Supersoul, Paramatma, is less productive of transcendental bliss than the supreme personal realization of his glories. The compiler of the Vedanta Darshan is Vyasadeva himself, yet he is troubled, although he is the author. So what sort of transcendental bliss can be derived by the readers and listeners of Vedanta, which is not explained directly by Vyasadeva, the author? Herein arises the necessity of explaining Vedanta Sutra in the form of Srimad Bhagavatam by the self-same author. Text number 9. Yata tarmadayas muni vyaryanukirtita natata vasudevasya mahima yanuvarnita. Although, great sage, you have very broadly described the four principles beginning with religious performances, you have not described the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Purport: the prompt diagnosis of Sri Narada is at once declared. The root cause of the despondency of Vyasadeva was his deliberate avoidance of glorifying the Lord in his various editions of the Puranas. He has certainly, as a matter of course, given descriptions of the glories of the Lord, Sri Krishna, but not as many as given to religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and salvation. These four items are by far inferior to engagement in the devotional service of the Lord. Sri Vyasadeva, as the authorized scholar, knew very well this difference, and still, instead of giving more importance to the better type of engagement, namely devotional service to the Lord, he has more or less improperly used his valuable time, and thus he was despondent. From this, it is clearly indicated that no one can be pleased substantially without being engaged in the devotional service of the Lord. In the Bhagavad Gita, that's nice to know, isn't it? From this, it is clearly indicated that no one can be pleased substantially without being engaged in the devotional service of the Lord. Good to know?
Yes.
In the Bhagavad Gita, this fact is clearly mentioned. After liberation, which is the last item in the line of performing religiosity, etc., one is engaged in pure devotional service. This is called the stage of self-realization, or the Brahmabhuta stage. That's from Srimad Bhagavatam 4:30-20. After attainment of this Brahmabhuta stage, one is satisfied. But satisfaction is the beginning of transcendental bliss. One should progress by attaining neutrality and equality in the relative world. And passing this stage of equanimity, one is fixed in the transcendental loving service of the Lord. This is the instruction of the personality of Godhead in the Bhagavad Gita. The conclusion is that in order to maintain the status quo of the Brahmabhuta stage, one also to increase the degree of transcendental realization, Narada recommended to Vyasadeva that he, Vyasadeva, should now eagerly and repeatedly describe the path of devotional service. This would cure him from gross despondency. 4:30:20. What do we have there? 4:30:20. Srimad Bhagavatam. For 30:20. Activities of the Prachetas. Says here, Navyavad Dhridaye Yajño Brahmaitad Brahmavad Dibi Na Muhyanti Na Shochanti Na Shrishyanti Yatogata. Always engaging in the activities of devotional service, devotees feel ever increasingly fresh and new in all their activities. The all-knower, the supersoul within the heart of the devotee, makes everything increasingly fresh. This is known as the Brahman position by the advocates of the Absolute Truth. In such a liberated stage, Brahmabhuta, one is never bewildered, nor does one lament or become unnecessarily jubilant. This is due to the Brahmabhuta situation. Purport: a devotee is inspired by the supersoul within the heart to advance in devotional service in a variety of ways. The devotee does not feel hackneyed or stereotyped, nor does he feel that he is in a stagnant position. In the material world, if one engages in chanting a material name, he will feel tired after chanting a few times. However, one can chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra all day and night and never feel tired. As chanting is increased, it will come out new and fresh. Srila Rupa Goswami said that if he could somehow get millions of ears and tongues, then he could relish spiritual bliss by chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. There is really nothing uninspiring for a highly advanced devotee. In Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says that he is situated in everyone's heart and that he helps the living entity forget and remember. By the grace of the Lord, the devotee gets inspiration. Tesham satata yuktanam bhajatam priti purvakam tadami buddhi yogam tam yena mamupayanti te. To those who are constantly devoted and worship me with love, I give the understanding by which they can come to me. Which verse is that from Bhagavad Gita? For 10 points. 10. 10 points for you. As stated, Kushala Karmanam, those engaged in auspicious activities in devotional service are guided by the Supersoul, described in this verse as Mya, or one who knows everything, past, present, and future. The Supersoul gives instructions to the sincere, unalloyed devotee on how he can progress more and more in approaching the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Srila Jiva Goswami in this connection says that the Supersoul, the plenary expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, exists in everyone's heart. But in the hearts of the devotee, he reveals himself as ever increasingly new. Being inspired by him, the devotee experiences increased transcendental bliss in the execution of his devotional service. Okay, comments? Comments, questions, complaints? Want your money back? Yes, Prabhu. Here, make sure you do a production.
In the first verse of 5th chapter, 151, so it was mentioned that the sage Vyasadeva is the Rishi among the Brahmanas, and Narada Muni is a Rishi among the gods. So, what is the difference? I mean, how is a Rishi different from a Brahmana, and why is it specifically mentioned?
Well,
Rishi among the Yeah, how is Rishi different from? Why is it being brought up there?
Because people are different. They have their own subtleties of difference, right?
Yeah.
But specifically about those two?
Yeah, so Rishi among the Brahmanas, why is he is a Rishi among the Brahmanas, and then Narada Muni is a Rishi among the demigods?
Well, if you look at the past of both of them and how Narada came out into the creation in a little bit more of a dramatic way amongst others who were first born into the universe. His, sometimes he's called Deva Darshan, and there's sense of him being around and in Brahmaloka and all over the place with different celestial beings and demigods and so forth. Vyasadeva, son of Parashara, known as the son of Parashara, and then he's more related to those who are in the Brahminical order. Let's see, I'll just go back to that verse and see if there's any more commentary also. That was verse number
1.
Okay. I'll tell you if there's anything more. Okay, so Krishna Chakravarti Thakur says in the 5th chapter, showing the uselessness of jnana and karma, Narada teaches Vyasa about bhakti with its chief component kirtan, welcoming his guest Vyasa. Welcoming his guest, Vyasa was worshipping Upasinam, him, by offering asana, argya, padya, and other items. A slight smile appeared on Narada's lips, which shows that he, knowing everything, was internally pleased with Vyasa. It was not possible for him to hide his smile by pretending something else because of the interesting questions he would pose. That's all that's there. Any other thoughts? Here, just hold this note. When you speak, we'll hold that way if anybody's online.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj Dandapranam. I was thinking that how even if Vyasadeva is not satisfied by writing everything about the Karam Kand, then how the other peoples who are following the Karam Kandas, they will be happy. They must realize it from the example of Vyasadeva only, who is the author.
I think Prabhupada made reference to that verse, or maybe he makes it later, but Naishkarmyam, if you're doing work without any desire for fruit of results, Naishkarmyam apyachuta bhava parjitam, but you don't have achuta bhava, that sense of love for achuta. Shobhate jnanam alam niranjanam. Doesn't look very nice. It's not satisfying. It's not beautiful. Prabhu?
So, we also understand that Vedvyasa has written a lot of Puranas, and in Puranas, there are Puranas in the mode of goodness, and he has glorified the different incarnations of Krishna in the form of Vishnu. But just because he has not done it enough, is this why he is not satisfied? I mean, okay, as we understand from the purport, although he has done it, but he has not focused on it. Is that the right understanding?
Yeah, like Narada says, you gave people excuses for staying in the material world. Because if you give an exception, then people take it as the rule. Like live live in the world, just be a little detached. They said they need to know the full spectrum of the activities of the Supreme Personality Godhead. And obviously, he goes into the samadhi and then he gives the revelation of Krishna in Vrndavana, Mathura, Dwarka. Has to be fully explained so that the mind can be attracted.
Another question.
Yeah.
As we also have heard, Guru Maharaj, there are 6 different philosophical systems. So Ved Vyas has proposed one of them, which is called Vedanta, and there are other philosophies which is proposed by Narada. I think that's called Vaisesika philosophy, and then similarly there's Nyaya, there's Yoga, I think by Patanjali. So there are 6 different rishis. They have proposed 6 philosophical systems. How can we understand that Vedanta is the best of them? And then out of that also Srimad Bhagavatam is better. I mean, they are also being provided by other sages, Gautama, Kannada, so Patanjali, and we follow. I think Patanjali also. I think we use this Patanjali's details one should surrender to Isha. So how to understand that Vedanta is best in all of them, and then focus on Vedanta and Srimad Bhagavatam?
Well, the word Vedanta means the end of the Vedas. What's the ultimate understanding? And why is it Srimad Bhagavatam? And Srila Jiva Goswami explains that in Tattva Sandarbha, using many Shastric references to show that the Puranas are more important than the original Vedas. What's more, they also complete the Vedas. Just like a golden bangle, you can only complete it if it's broken with gold. It's got to be the same quality. So the Puranas are most important because they bring one to clear understanding of the purpose of the Vedas. It's a tree, but if you just look at the trunk of the tree, or you take some of the bark, if it's a mango tree, you're not going to really taste any mango. So Bhagavatam itself declares, Nigama kalpataro galitam palam. Ultimately, the purpose of a tree is to produce a fruit. So then it declares, here's the fruit that's come out of the whole tree of the Vedas. And, what's its characteristic? How sweet is it? What is the effect of the tree and so forth. So first, given the fact that it's true that the Srimad Bhagavatam, the other Puranas, and then amongst the other Puranas, the Srimad Bhagavatam, the Puranas all complete the Vedas. They're not something separate from it. And Jiva Goswami also proves that they're more important than the Vedas. And then he shows how the Srimad Bhagavatam is the most important amongst all the Puranas. In fact, that discussion goes on in the Brihad Bhagavatamrita when all of the Vedas personified come together for a debate about which one's best. All the ones that you mentioned, they're all personified there and they're having an argument about it. Srimad Bhagavatam at first just stays out of it because Srimad Bhagavatam is so superior to all the other ones it doesn't even really need to discuss it. And then the attention, Sanatana Goswami brings attention to the Srimad Bhagavatam and the superiority of it, that it's the fruit, it actually completes all of the purposes of the other processes that have some kind of a tinge of connection to either the material world, or they don't fully give the expansive nature of our relationship with the personality of God in Krishna in the spiritual world. It's the pinnacle. That's even Chaitanya Charitamrita, which then goes on to flesh that out more. Like in the beginning of Chaitanya Charitamrita, the Mangalacharna describes how Anarpita Charim Chirat hasn't been described before. The limit of the Vedas, or the ultimate beauty of the Vedas, which culminates in our relationship with Krishna, but in which relationship? Those relationships that are described in Goloka, that aren't even available in Vaikuntha, because the author goes on to say, those relationships in Vaikuntha are known, but what about others? And now we're going to tell about that. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's come to explain that. And his whole life is the teachings of the Bhagavatam. So altogether it's pointing to our ultimate relationship with Krishna in the spiritual world. And that's the complete picture. So how can you know one is better than the other? Well, the qualities are there. Rupa Goswami talks about the qualities of Krishna and Narayan. So he delineates that. Of course, he starts with Ete Chamsha Kala Pumsa Krishna Stu Bhagavan Swayam. I mean, from one perspective, Krishna is the source of all the other avatars. So that's one thing. But then what about the qualities? So the 64 qualities are there in Krishna. There's only 60 in Narayan. And those 4 qualities are important because they have to do with the vilas, or the loving relationship that's so beautiful and attractive that the devotees have with Krishna in the spiritual world, and Krishna's beauty, his flute playing, wonderful pastimes, especially childhood pastimes that attract the mind. So by quality, he's also, if you count him up, say what are the qualities he's analyzed for us, it points to Krishna in the spiritual, in the pinnacle of the spiritual plane. Goloka namni nijadamni taleta tasya. What is it in the cosmography of the universe? There's gradations, and then the highest is Goloka. And what's in Goloka? Uttara in the Bhagavatamrita had guessed that because there's that special kind of devotion that some devotees have, there must be a place for it. So could you tell me about that place? And Sanatana Goswami thought, my mother's very intelligent. And that's why he described how Gopakumar went everywhere. And of course, any relationship the devotee has with Krishna is right for him, but there is a sense of hierarchy. That's why in the Bhagavatamrita there's this delineation of the hierarchy. One's higher than the other. Coming to the ultimate, which is the love of the gopis, and the highest is Srimati Radharani. Rupa Goswami kind of summarizes that in the Upadeshamrita, right? Vaikuntas Janito Vara Marupuri Yatrapi Ratsotsavad Vrindaranya Mudaripani Ramana Tatrapi Govardhanaha Radha Kunda Mihapi Gokulapate Primamrita Lavana Kuriyadasya Virajato Giridite Sevam Viveki Nakaha. He goes higher, 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 all the way up to the place where that kind of expression of love is taking place in Radhakund. Then he talks about the different types of people, starting with the karmis. Karmi bhya parito hare priyataya vyaktim yayur gyaninas tebyo gyani vimukta bhakti parama premaika nishtas tata tebyas ta pashupala pankajad drishas tabyo pisaradika prishta tadvant yam tadiya sarasi tamnashaya kakriti. Higher, higher, higher. So taking us to the pinnacle of that special love that Uttara intuited is there. And then it's actually explained in the Bhagavatam, like nowhere else. Prabhu?
I like Guru Maharaj that Srila Vyasadeva presented his problem, his dilemma, to his spiritual master, and he also admitted that you know perfectly about me, and so I'm submitting unto you for guidance. And in one place in purport, Srila Prabhupada writes, the prompt diagnosis of Sri Narada is at once declared.
Was what?
The prompt diagnosis of
Yes, that's right.
Sri Narada is at once declared.
Is that once declared? Yes.
So, the root cause of Srila Vyasadeva is despondency. So, I was also thinking that I should also submit to my spiritual master, because as it is explained, he is perfect in self-realization, so he can at once identify the root cause, which even Srila Vyasadeva was not able to, seems apparently, identify on his own, alone. That's a reflection. And I have a question that follows. So then it's stated that the root cause of the despondency of Vyasadeva was his deliberate avoidance of glorifying the Lord in his various editions of the Puranas. So here Srila Vyasadeva deliberately avoided, and how could, so what is the intent behind it?
Well, it's an age-old conundrum, because when you're trying to bring people closer to the absolute truth, you have to cater to their level. And just like nowadays, people are always trying to make a bridge situation. And oftentimes, in presenting to newer people, you try to create so much of a bridge that, you know, there's no completion of it. It doesn't take you all the way across. Since there's a hesitancy to give people that much information about the spiritual world. I mean, even Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, this shouldn't be taught to people who are not devoted or austere. And Prabhupada said, well, devotees do it anyway, because they understand the purpose of the Lord. And the members of the Panchatattva have this sense of, you know, just give it to everybody. Magi vana magi. That, like, whoever asks for it, doesn't ask for it, patra ba apatra, is a good place or a bad place. Then they just give it anyway. So it's that mood of, why is it deliberate? Just because there's always an eternal adjustment going on, and how to present it in such a way that the people of that audience can accept it. And then somebody comes along inevitably and says, you know, you're not saying enough. You have to actually tell them. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, you know, when somebody would write a newspaper article about them, he'd say, how many times did they say Krishna? He said, so what about the PR piece? It's all how many times they said Krishna. So, you know, we go back and forth between, like, okay, we're nice people. It's like, yeah, but it's Hare Krishna. A godbrother of mine described how if you're in a shower, it's got two knobs, like there was in Chicago, in LA, old apartment, you know, knob here, knob there. Trying to get it at the right temperature. It's like too much here, too much there. You got hands on both knobs. So, what to speak of us? Vyasadeva was thinking like how to present it in such a way that people can accommodate it. And Narada was pushing him further. Say the whole thing. Tell them, don't worry. It's not gonna chase them away. They need this. They need to hear the whole thing. Because that's one of the themes of the Bhagavatam too. Yeneira vindakshava muktamaninas tvayastabhava avashudha buddhaya Aruya Krishnena Parampadam Tata Patantito Nadrita Yushmarangraya. Then unless you know about the person, then you're not going to be able to break away from the material world. Other verses, yat pada pankacha palasa vilasya bhakta karmashrayam gratitam ugratayanti santa tadvanda rikta matayo yatayo piruda shroto ganas tamaranam bhajavasudeva. That verse also is in the same vein, that those who are rikta matayo, they don't have the conception of sweetness of the Supreme, the vilas, the playfulness of the Lord, and so forth. They can't withstand the strong waves of material existence. Yakriditam rajavadu vidraham chavishnu shadhanvito nashinu yadata varna yadya bhaktim param bhagavati pratilabhya kamam hridrogam ashva pahino yacharina dhira. Shukadeva Goswami says, if you hear with faith about Krishna's intimate pastimes with the gopis of Vrindavan, then you can overcome kama. But when you're just in self-realization mode, the process doesn't become complete. Have to have mind attracted and full transfer from the topics of the material world to the spiritual world. And it has to be the vilas, playfulness of the Lord. You were going to ask another question. Or give a reference.
Oh, for this?
Oh, go ahead.
I just was acknowledging that verse is so nice. Yat pada pankaj vilas vilas palash vilas. It's such a nice, beautiful poetry. I just feel so. This is another benefit of devotional service. The verses itself are those so beautiful. I mean, how more beautiful Krishna would be, who is glorified with these beautiful verses. And I just feel that nobody can compose these verses unless there is somebody to put that love for, somebody should inspire that kind of emotions in the heart of the devotee. So many beautiful verses come out. And so, yeah, they're, as you say, they're self-effulgent, who can write this kind of poetry? I mean, unless somebody has really strayed your heart, somebody has really felt it.
It's a nice point. Yeah.
If you could elaborate more on disciple submitting his position to the spiritual master.
Well, we always need outside help, because it's hard to see ourselves as we are. That's why people get coaches in any discipline. Like, what am I doing wrong? Even the top people, it's hard for them to see themselves. And in spiritual practice also, we need somebody that can observe us and see what we're doing wrong, what we're doing right, and help in that way. So it's important to submit oneself for examination. It's like, Prabhupada once said with Vyasa Puja, he said it's an examination to see how much advancement you've made. So when you give an offering to the spiritual master, then it's to be judged, oh, look, this person has some deep realization. So there, there's different points at which, we can always self-examine, which is swadhyaya, like even chanting japa, like, can I sit here? Can I chant? Do I like this or not? And we can see for ourselves if we do. As you were saying, it's self-effulgent, the process itself. But sometimes we become unaware of what things we may be doing right or wrong. Like somebody who's in a more subtle position and also has the task of observing you, may pick up something, not you, but anybody's, like somebody says something in a certain way, and then the person can detect, like, oh, your attitude's just slightly like this or that. And then say, oh, here's a little something I could suggest. Because it can be really helpful, because one correction like that can make somebody aware that, oh, I wasn't even aware that that was there. And now it's very helpful. So, those who are really progressive in any practice are open to be corrected. They live for it. And, they submit, say, what do you think? But you really have to be submissive, because oftentimes teachers are reluctant to say anything because they know that person doesn't really want to know. Sometimes it's like, don't be too hard. But Narada was pretty heavy. Jugupsita means this abominable what you've done. But he was smiling. So was Krishna when he instructed Arjuna. Sochanam basochastam pragnavaram shchabasase gatasam cha nanu shochanti pandita. Krishna smiled before he chastised Arjuna. It's like, okay, you asked for it. Here you go. You're a fool. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said that. He said, I'm a murka. I'm a fool before my spiritual master, because then it can be corrected. So it's a vital aspect. Pranipat means, tell me. It can be really, really hard. One of my godbrothers was telling me how Prabhupada had called him into his room late at night while he was translating and said, what are you doing? He said, I'm sleeping. He said, why are you sleeping? He said, I'm tired, Prabhupada. He said, why are you tired? I'm not tired. I'm up here in the middle of the night. I didn't even sleep, and I'm enlivened. Why are you tired? He's like, I'm a conditioned soul, Prabhupada. He said, why are you a conditioned soul? And he said, all day long he had been serving Prabhupada, and it wasn't just like a joke or something. He was actually pressing him on a very existential level. And, my godbrother said to me that, he said, I just broke out crying. And Prabhupada he put his head in Prabhupada's lap, and Prabhupada just kind of patted him and then sent him back to bed. But it was, a revelation to him. It's like, I'm a conditioned soul because I want to be a conditioned soul. And it, somebody can help you come to a clearer understanding of your position. It can be very helpful. Any little chastisements too, from anybody, can be really so